Welcome back to part three of my comments and recommendations for Italy. So, this is about the Roman sites. So, if you don't know this, there's a Colosseum in just about every town. France has like 10 of them. I've seen two in Germany. And until this trip, the biggest and the best one I'd ever seen was in Trier, Germany, which is interesting because it's the only one that's actually part of the defensive fortifications because Trier is near the German, near the border of Germania and the part not controlled by Rome. Um, the one in Milan is almost completely gone. If you want to see what's left of it, it's underneath the churches. There's a church not far from the site um, where there's some pillars, Roman columns outside, and if you go underneath that church, you can see stones from the Colosseum that used to be in Milan or Mediolanum, as it's called. So the second best Colosseum that I've seen in Rome is actually in Verona. They're going to hold the Olympic closing ceremonies there this year, so it'll be kind of cool to see. I don't think that's a good deal though, because that was €12 and the one in Rome is 18 or 24. So let me talk about that first. So if you're going to go to Rome, I don't know that you need to pay to see anything. The Colosseum access, you won't see much that you can't see from the outside. Of course, you can't walk around and go up the steps, but most of it is a museum, and there's not very much to see because the Colosseum has been dismantled. If you look at the outside, you'll see a lot of pit marks in it. Those are left there when it was damaged when people came to use it as a quarry, and they ripped the marble facing off of the outside, and because it was anchored in with metal anchors. And there's a whole bunch of other metal braces, and there's some of them are still standing, which you can see when you go on the inside, holding the Colosseum together, because it isn't just stacked rocks; there's metal brackets holding it together. And so what you see most of the Colosseum is actually the inner court. There is a whole outer court, and on the northeast side, there's still part of the outer concourse that's there. Um, but it's the best one still standing, but it's still not in its full splendor. If you do go in the Colosseum, there are two different price tiers. There's an €18 price tier and a €24 price tier. If you do go for the €24 price tier, the only one I think that's worth that is if you can go do the underground as well, because in order to go down below what would have been the floor and see there's 2 stories below ground that were service. There's only 1 story in Trier. There's 2 stories in Rome underneath that one, and if you pay €6 extra and you can get one, which I couldn't because I think they're all bought by tour groups, and so you might have a hard time getting one. If you can't get one of those, don't bother with any of the €24 options. I did the other one, which was the full access one, and all that I got to see that was addition to the €18 was 2 things. Number one, I got to go stand on a section that's been rebuilt of the floor near the gate where they would take the dead people out of, which I didn't learn until I got in there. That's that gate, the one that's furthest away from the forum, which makes sense. That's where they take the dead people out of, and you get to stand there, and you can only be there. I think it's like 30 minutes. Now they're not like hard and fast about that, and there is a special entrance there just for you if you want to pay that and go through the special entrance, because there's a shortcut line over there for those people only. Otherwise, the €18 24-hour access is sufficient. And you don't even need to pay to see that. You can see all the outside of the Colosseum, and you can see into it from the outside. And if you've ever been inside of a Roman amphitheater, they're basically all the same. The Colosseum in Rome is, however, the most still intact one. It is rather spectacular. So the €18 one is the one I would recommend. That also gives you access to the Forum. The €24 one would also give you access to what's called the super sites, which are basically rooms inside the old Imperial Palace on Palatine Hill that have artifacts in them that you can't see unless you've paid for that. And I've only found 4 of the 7, and so I don't. Was I cheated? Maybe, maybe not. Now you can see most of the Forum from outside the Forum. There are since modern Rome is about 12 feet above the Roman Forum, the road around it. There's of course railings and things, so you can't go in, but you can photograph it from the outside without going inside. You may not know what you're looking at, and you may think that you're seeing things that you're not seeing, like the Triumphal Arch is the Triumphal Arch of Severus. It has nothing to do with ancient Rome. It's a more modern one. It is the only one in Rome that's still standing. that's in the Forum. There's one between the Colosseum and the Forum that you can see without paying anything. So if you want to see an actual ancient Roman triumphal arch, it's right there. You don't have to pay to see anything. To see that anyway. And I don't actually recommend necessarily paying to see it. There's the circus, but if you pay to see it, you get to see the two towers. I saw I saw one of the towers for the Roman circus in Mediolanum because it's still standing, and a museum, and it was €5. And the museum was 3 floors of artifacts and history about the region. So I would recommend that one instead of the circus full experience, whatever that means. If you want to go up on the Palatine Hill, it's a pretty steep hill. It's remarkable how close everything is. You have all the forums, then the Palatine Hill, the circus, and the Aventine Hill, and they're like right there. Colosseum, the Triumphal Arch. It was a really compact city, and it's really interesting to see how well it came together. What you won't see is any of the buildings for housing. If you want to see those, you have to go somewhere else, and that's the other half of this video. So if you are a cheapskate like me, don't spend any money in Rome. If you want to see the Colosseum, then pay the €18 option. That also gives you access to the Forum. And you have 24 hours from the time you get it validated to do both. You can only get to enter each one once. And the Colosseum is a one-way path, and then you come out. Basically right next to where you come in. So you go in, go upstairs, around, and then out the other side. So you go up one side and then around and then down the other side and out. So you get to see the whole thing, except for the underground part for €18. That's the best. That's the best bang for your buck if you haven't seen an amphitheater yet, because when in Rome, and then you can also see the Forum. So that's the one I recommend. But if you are a super cheapskate, you don't have to pay to see the Forum. Oh, and use their official sites. I'll put the sites. I think I put them on the first video. Use their official sites for the Colosseum itself, because everyone else has a markup, and it will be way more. Unless you want a tour guide. I think you can get a tour guide from the Colosseum site itself, because there were like small tours. There was one group that was like 4 people at a tour guide, so you can do that if you want to. But again, these are Italians; they're not Romans. It's not their culture. It's not their civilization, and they don't really care. Now, what I actually recommend that you do, which is better bang for your buck, is leave Rome entirely. If you fly into Rome, you'll fly into a town called Funicino, which is a town that didn't exist during the Roman Empire. Just south of that is the old port of Hadrian, the emperor. And that is a part of basically a state park, the state park of Ostia Antica. And I went to Ostia Antica because I wanted to see an ancient Roman city that doesn't have a modern city sitting on top of it. It was sold on the internet as Pompeii without the crowds and without the restrictions. Because if you want to go to Pompeii, they have a limited access to it, and you have to apply for a spot, and they're trying to protect it, which I get. Because Pompeii is an important city, Ostia Antica is not. Ostia Antica used to be the port city for Rome. It used to be on the coast. It's not on the coast anymore because of 2 reasons. Number 1, the Tiber River changed course. And number 2, the Tiber River has dumped so much silt that the coast is now 4 kilometers to the west. And so with Ostia Antica no longer on the river, no longer near the coast, in about 900 AD, it was simply abandoned. And it was abandoned as it was. And people just packed up and left. And then it was forgotten about. And it wasn't until the 1880s, I think, that they actually figured out where it was, because the river had moved and they weren't sure where it was, and they were able to uncover it. And they uncovered it and discovered it's still just sitting there covered with dirt. So Ostia Antica is worth it for a couple of reasons. Number 1 is the price. It's €18 for the entire state park. The entire state park includes Ostia Antica itself, the fortress, which is a more modern fortress, which is one of the original houses away from Rome for the Pope. You can't go in his quarters because there's water damage, but you can go see a triangle fort, which is a very rare design, that's basically right outside of Ostia Antica. Ostia Antica ends, then there's the necropolis, and then there's this fortress right across the street. So it's actually rather remarkable. So it covers those 2 things. It also covers the old necropolis that's north of the Tiber River. It includes the port of Hadrian, and it includes a ship museum. So you can spend the entire day. It's good for a week, I think he said. So you can see all those sites, all 5 of those things for €18. which makes it a good bang for your buck. And I spent about 3 hours in Ostia Antica because it's one of the best preserved Roman cities ever because it was abandoned, it wasn't destroyed. And so no one, I'm sure it got looted, but if you want to see an actual Roman city as they were, it hasn't been messed with because it was abandoned and it was forgotten about. It has a couple of baths. The baths still have the drainage and the floors. One of them even has a central fountain, or what's left of it. It has a necropolis because by Roman law, they had to bury their dead outside of town. It's just to the east of the city between Ostia Antica and the visitor center, which is mostly just a gift shop. There's a museum too, but it's a modern art museum. It has at least 4 Roman villas in it. There's 4 that I can remember. There might have been more. Complete with rooms, decor, flooring. So it's got marble, it's got pillars, it's got the cutouts in it, where you can actually walk into a Roman patrician's home. Now, there's no artifacts in there, but you can actually walk inside of their homes and see what decor is left. One of them has a statue in it still, in what I guess was the bathroom. But public toilets. There are at least 2. I found 2 of them. Public toilets, which are communal toilets with a bunch of places you can sit right next to someone else. But it's kind of cool to see them. Oh, a public toilet, because Rome was one of the first civilizations to do that. It has a theater. It does not have an amphitheater, but it does have a theater. It's one of the best preserved theaters. The only theater I've seen besides that was better preserved is the one in Verona, and that's because there's a convent built into it, which preserved some of the structure of the back of the theater because it's the outside wall of the convent. That was pretty spendy. That was €8 alone to just see the theater. They were working on it when I was there because a lot of it's collapsing because it was basically been held up by dirt. It has a Roman road in it, so you can see some ruts in the rocks. It has storehouses, large storehouse. It still has some of the industries. The granary is still there. It has one of the biggest bakeries that's still intact. It also has some shops in it that have still have the advertisements on the wall, and there's tons and tons and tons of homes that still have the plaster on the wall and painting on the plaster. So you can still see decorations that are at least 1,000 years old and maybe 2,000 years old painted on the insides of the walls of these homes, as well as the flooring, because there's a lot of Roman mosaic flooring in those houses, and you can tell when you're in the apartments versus the houses because the apartments have lower quality mosaic. They're lower, fewer colors than the ones that are in the private homes. There's several temples. There's the largest prefecture, which is a firehouse that I've ever seen, right by the dock. What would have been the docks, but right now there's a farm there and horses where the docks used to be, and then a large mercantile square behind the theater, where the screen would have been on the theater. Then there's a big plaza behind it with all the shops. And in front of the shops, they have mosaic flooring tiles for each of not the guilds, because there's guild marks in different parts of the city as well. But that one has each of the individual shops, individual mosaic markers. It has the greatest concentration of those in one place that you will ever see. Individual members of a guild and the very varied guilds. If you go there between November and March, like I did, most of the guild markers will be covered. This is to protect them from degradation. One of the baths is also covered because remember, these are like 2,000-year-old flooring that's been only uncovered for about 150 years, and it was covered with dirt for 900 years. So they're trying to preserve it and protect it, so you may not be able to see those. But even in wintertime, it was worth seeing to walk around because basically they abandoned the city. So you still have the walls and the doors. The roofs were probably thatched or wood, and so they're not there anymore. But there's tons of decoration. There's still, I'm sure there's artifacts still, not that I was looking for artifacts. And you can walk around an actual Roman city. And it's kind of a weird Roman city because it has some streets that are not normally Roman. It has some that are at 45-degree angles. Because when they put Ostia Antica there was already a village there, and they used a couple of the streets that were already there from, I think it's the Etruscans who were there before. And so they have their 2 main Roman streets, and then there's 2 like this at 45-degree angles from the Decimus Maximus that they just kept there. But it was definitely worth seeing, and I was very glad I went to see that. So if you go to Rome, I actually recommend you take a day or two and go out to Ostia and see all that it has. Because for the same price as just the Colosseum and the Forum, you can see an entire Roman city, a 1300s to 1400s castle, the necropolis, the old port of Hadrian, and a museum about shipping in the Mediterranean for 18 euros. That's the second best deal that I got. The other one was Milan. I'll talk about that. But it was the second best bang for my buck of any museums that I saw while I was there. And everyone else I think that was there was a local because it was parents explaining to their kids what they were seeing. It's like, you've clearly been here before. So it was really cool. They haven't removed all the dirt, so you're actually walking above in the significant amount of it where the actual floor would have been when it was during the Roman Empire. But it is a historically relevant city. I know Octavian / Augustus, Julius's successor, put in there when he came back, I think from defeating Mark Antony. So it has historical significance, and it was there's still some remnants of the old defenses, but it basically got abandoned because it outgrew the defensive perimeter and the river changed, and the river was part of its defense. And when the river moves, all of a sudden you have one whole side of the city with no protection. So it was an undefensible city, and so everyone that was there moved somewhere else. There's a modern city, Ostia, which is even further to the west, actually on the coast. And there's another small village there that it was clearly used to be an island off the coast that is now connected. So it's helped to preserve it because it became unimportant historically to the empire. So if you go to Rome, I recommend that you go out there. I felt like that was like I got to see more Roman stuff there, more relevant Roman stuff. And of course, you don't see the triumphal arch. You don't see as many pillars and columns. They had some, but not as many. But in terms of actual decor, there's very few places where you can actually see modern decor and flooring like you can in Ostia Antica. So I recommend it. Even if you just use the AI and look for things to see in Ostia Antica, it will come up with a list. I found just about everything on that list, and so it was actually pretty cool to go and see. Oh, the other thing that was cool was they had some pots in the ground for storage, and I'm not sure what they used them for because they're not sure either. The only other place I've ever seen that is in Barcelona, underneath the cathedral in what was the Roman city of Barcino. They have two shops underneath there, one of which was a wine shop where the barrels were for wine to ferment in, and the other one was a fish packing. So they would have cut the fish, put it into these buried clay pots in the ground to store it. So it's kind of cool to see. There's like 25 of them in this one shop on the floor. They're still there and still pretty much intact. And you can like wander around ad libitum. Like there's almost no restrictions on where to go. They have some places that are cordoned off because they don't want you walking on the mosaics, the really good ones. And some of those are covered in the wintertime. But I mean, you could go up on things and see, overlook the city. And it was actually really cool to see the different types of housing, the different quality of housing, and it's kind of a mishmash city. It wasn't master planned like you would think of with Rome. And I guess the closer you are to Rome, the more likely that is to be. Because Trier is very obviously master planned. So if you ever get to that one, I recommend it as well. I think it has only 3 baths. And Ostia Antica has 3. So Ostia Antica was definitely an important city. Anyway, that's my recommendation when you go to Rome on how to get your biggest bang for your buck if you're there for the Roman Empire. And if you don't want to go all the way down to Naples to see Pompeii, Ostia Antica is probably a very venerable second choice. Anyway, Godspeed, safe travels.